The Landlord's Pride. Mr. Harold Jenkins stood at the large window of his elegantly appointed office, surveying the pristine neighborhood he had meticulously crafted. Each house, with its manicured lawns and tasteful architecture, represented years of hard work and dedication. He had built this community from the ground up, and it filled him with an undeniable sense of pride. As he turned back to his desk, the polished wood gleamed under the soft glow of the overhead lights. Framed photos of each property adorned the walls, telling the story of his success, an empire constructed brick by brick, decision by decision. His fingers brushed over the wood as he recalled the early days when he bought his first building, a humble structure in need of love. "I've come a long way," he muttered to himself, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. But Mr. Jenkins's pride was not without its conditions. He firmly believed in maintaining high standards for his properties. His rental policies were strict, and he made no apologies for it. To him, it was these policies that preserved the value of his investments. As he sifted through a fresh stack of rental applications, his eyes narrowed, scanning each form with a critical eye. "Can't let just anyone in," he said aloud, his voice firm. "Got to keep things exclusive." When he came across an application that piqued his interest, he felt a momentary pause. The name on the paper sent a flicker of concern through him. Shaking his head, he quickly tossed it aside. "No, no," he muttered, his resolve hardening. "Can't have any of them here. It would change the whole atmosphere." A small twinge of guilt pricked at his conscience, but he swiftly pushed it aside. In his mind, he was doing what was best for his community, convinced that his other tenants wouldn't want neighbors like them. As he leaned back in his leather chair, the weight of his decisions settled over him. He convinced himself that his prejudices were justified, telling himself, "I built this empire with my own two hands. I have the right to decide who lives here. It's my property, my rules." This mantra soothed him, allowing him to dismiss any lingering doubts. Meanwhile, across town, the Thompson family was gathered around their kitchen table, a palpable excitement in the air. Robert and Lisa Thompson, along with their 4 energetic boys, Ethan, Noah, Jacob, and Caleb, were about to take a significant step in their lives. On the table lay the rental application for one of Mr. Jenkins' properties, a home they hoped would be theirs. "This could be a big step for our family," Robert began, his voice warm and encouraging. The boys leaned in closer, their eyes wide with anticipation. "The new house has more space for all of us to grow." Lisa nodded, her eyes sparkling with hope. "And it's closer to your schools. Just think, no more waking up at the crack of dawn." Ethan, the oldest, piped up, "Will we each get our own room, Dad?" Robert chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "Not quite, son, but you'll have more space than you do now." The younger boys chimed in with their wishes for a big backyard and the possibility of finally getting a dog. Lisa laughed, her heart swelling with love for her family. As Robert filled out the application, Lisa turned to the boys. "What do you think about the new house?" she asked, her voice light and playful. Noah, with his big blue eyes, exclaimed, "I hope it has a big backyard." Jacob nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, maybe we can finally get a dog." Step by step, Lisa smiled, embracing the simple joys of family life. Caleb, the youngest, climbed onto his mother's lap, looking up at her with wide eyes. "Will we still be close to Grandma and Grandpa?" Lisa hugged him tight. "We'll be a little farther away, sweetie, but we'll still visit them often." As Robert completed the application, he looked up, his gaze sweeping over his family. Despite their successes in business, they had always chosen a modest lifestyle. This move, while still humble, represented a step toward a better life for their boys. "Now remember," Robert said, his tone gently reminding them, "this house isn't guaranteed. Mr. Jenkins has to approve our application." Lisa squeezed his hand, her voice full of reassurance. "We've been good tenants everywhere we've lived. I'm sure Mr. Jenkins will see that." The family huddled together, their hopes high and hearts full of dreams for their potential new home. unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. Their love for each other and their faith in goodness shone brightly, ready to face whatever came their way. Back in his office, Mr. Jenkins sat behind his polished mahogany desk, the stack of rental applications before him. His fingers, adorned with a heavy gold ring, tapped impatiently against the wood as he sifted through the papers. When he reached the Thompson family's application, his brow furrowed in concentration. As he skimmed through the details, he noted Robert and Lisa's strong income, their stable family life, and their glowing references. On paper, they were the ideal tenants. Yet, a cloud of discomfort settled in his mind. He was conflicted, battling an internal war as he glanced at the family photo attached to the application. "Well, well," he muttered, his voice low and disapproving. "What do we have here?" He leaned back, the leather creaking beneath him, as he wrestled with the reality of the situation. The Thompsons met every criterion he had established for tenants. They were successful, had a stable family, and their references were impeccable. But there was one glaring detail he couldn't overlook: their skin color. A voice in the back of his mind whispered that he was being unfair, that rejecting them based on race was wrong. Yet Mr. Jenkins pushed the thought away, focusing instead on maintaining what he referred to as the character of his properties. "It's about keeping standards," he reiterated to himself, trying to convince the nagging voice that this wasn't personal. With a heavy sigh, Mr. Jenkins picked up his pen, scribbling down vague reasons for rejection. Concerns about overcrowding, noise levels, he muttered, fully aware that these were merely excuses to justify his decision. As he sealed the rejection letter in an envelope, a wave of guilt washed over him. He tried to shake it off, reminding himself of the exclusive community he had built. "It's just business," he muttered, dropping the envelope into his outgoing mail tray. But even as he said it, he felt a pang of discomfort gnawing at his conscience, an uneasiness that he couldn't quite shake. Across town, Robert Thompson sat at the kitchen table, shoulders slumped as he stared at the rejection letter from Mr. Jenkins. The paper trembled in his hands, a mix of disappointment and frustration etched across his face. Lisa, sensing his turmoil, gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked softly. Robert looked up, his eyes brimming with sadness and determination. "Mr. Jenkins rejected our application," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But then a spark ignited within him. "But you know what? We don't need his fancy house. We'll build our own home." Lisa's eyes widened in surprise. "Build our own home? Are you sure?" Robert nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. "Yes, I am. We'll find a piece of land on the outskirts of town. It might not be as fancy as Mr. Jenkins' properties, but it'll be ours." Lisa squeezed his shoulder, pride swelling within her. "That's my Robert," she said warmly, always finding a way forward. He stood up, drawing her into a tight hug. "It won't be easy," he murmured into her hair, "but we'll make it work. We always do." With renewed determination, Robert turned to the boys, who were now watching intently. "Remember what we always tell you when life gives you lemons?" he asked, a playful smile breaking through the tension. "Make lemonade." Ethan grinned, joining in. "Yeah, we can turn this into something good." The Thompson family's spirits lifted as they envisioned their future, filled with hope and love. Little did they know, their journey was just beginning, and the truth that would ultimately connect them to Mr. Jenkins was yet to unfold. A new beginning. As dawn broke over the quiet town, the Thompson household stirred with renewed energy. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the family's breakfast table where Lisa was busy preparing a simple yet hearty meal. The scent of pancakes mingled with the rich aroma of brewed coffee, wrapping the kitchen in warmth and comfort. The boys, still in their pajamas, rushed to the table, chattering excitedly about their plans for the day. "Can we go see that piece of land today, Dad?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. "You said it has trees and everything." Robert smiled at his eldest son, feeling a swell of pride and determination. "Absolutely, We'll go see it after breakfast. I think you guys will really love it." As the boys dug into their pancakes, Robert took a moment to reflect on their new journey. After Mr. Jenkins' rejection, the initial disappointment had been palpable. But now, the idea of building their own home brought a sense of purpose that ignited a fire within him. No longer would they be at the mercy of someone else's whims. They would create a space that reflected their values, their dreams, and their identity as a family. After breakfast, they piled into their old but reliable minivan, excitement bubbling in the air. Robert navigated the familiar streets, passing by the rows of houses that stood as a testament to his community's charm. He had grown up here, in this town, but he was beginning to see it in a new light, one that was free from the biases that had once clouded his vision. The drive to the land was filled with laughter and playful banter among the boys. Lisa's heart swelled with happiness as she listened to their chatter, grateful for the love that bound them together. They were united in this new adventure, and she couldn't help but feel hopeful about what lay ahead. When they finally arrived at the parcel of land, Robert parked the minivan at the edge of the overgrown lot. He turned off the engine and looked out at the sprawling space before them. Tall grasses danced in the gentle breeze, and wildflowers punctuated the green landscape with bursts of color. Towering trees bordered the property, their branches swaying gracefully as if welcoming the family to their new beginning. "Wow!" Caleb exclaimed, jumping out of the minivan first. "Look at all the grass. Can we have a soccer field? Or a treehouse?" Jacob added, his imagination racing as he explored the terrain. Ethan, always the thoughtful one, approached his father. "Dad, can we really build our house here?" he asked, his voice laced with awe and a hint of uncertainty. Robert knelt down to his son's level, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Yes, we can. It won't be fancy like Mr. Jenkins' properties, but it'll be ours. We'll work together to make it a home." As they wandered the land, Robert and Lisa exchanged ideas about their future. They envisioned a cozy house, a small garden, and enough space for the boys to run freely. They talked about where they would place the bedrooms and what kind of flowers they would plant. The dreams flowed freely, and with each idea, they felt their connection to the land grow stronger. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the family began to feel the weight of the task ahead. Building a home from scratch was no small feat, especially without the resources that came with renting a well-established property. But Robert's determination shone through. "We'll take it one step at a time," he reassured Lisa. "We can start by clearing the land and saving for materials." That evening, as they returned home, the Thompson family buzzed with excitement. They gathered around their modest dining table, sharing their thoughts on the day. The boys were full of ideas about what they could do with the space. They began to sketch plans for their future home on scrap paper, their youthful enthusiasm spilling over into laughter and chatter. Meanwhile, across town, Mr. Jenkins sat in his grand office, the rejection letter he had sent to the Thompsons still fresh in his mind. He glanced out the window, his gaze falling upon the meticulously kept neighborhood he had built. Despite his success, an uncomfortable knot twisted in his stomach. The image of the Thompson family lingered in his thoughts, their smiling faces a stark contrast to the excuses he had crafted to justify his decision. In that moment of reflection, Mr. Jenkins found himself questioning the very principles he had built his empire on. Was it really about maintaining standards, or was it rooted in something deeper, something more insidious? The nagging voice inside him grew louder, urging him to confront the reality he had long avoided. Shaking off the unsettling thoughts, he turned his attention to a new batch of rental applications, but the names blurred together. As he sifted through the papers, he found himself wondering about the Thompsons. What if he had given them a chance? What kind of neighbors would they have been? The question haunted him, and he was surprised to find himself feeling a sense of loss for the opportunity he had denied. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. His assistant, Clara, peeked in with a bright smile. "Mr. Jenkins, I've just received a call from your son. He's coming over this evening." "Sam's coming," Mr. Jenkins replied, a mixture of surprise and delight flooding through him. What does he want? Clara shrugged. He didn't say much, just that he wanted to talk. As evening approached, Mr. Jenkins prepared for his son's visit. He felt a flutter of excitement mingled with apprehension. Sam had always been a bright light in his life, and Mr. Jenkins cherished the moments they spent together. But recently, their conversations had grown tense, often revolving around differing views on social issues. When Sam arrived, he was greeted by the familiar warmth of his father's office, but the tension was palpable. Mr. Jenkins offered his son a drink, and they settled into the plush chairs, a comfortable silence hanging between them for a moment. "Dad, I've been hearing some things about you," Sam began, his tone serious. "Things?" Mr. Jenkins asked, feeling the knot in his stomach tighten. "About how you handle the rental properties. Some people are saying you've been turning away good families because of their race." Mr. Jenkins felt his face flush. "That's not true. I have standards. It's about maintaining the integrity of my properties." "Is that really what it's about?" Sam challenged, leaning forward in his chair. "Or is it about something deeper? You have to recognize that those standards have been influenced by a history of prejudice. You're not just affecting your business, you're affecting real people's lives." Mr. Jenkins opened his mouth to respond, but found himself at a loss for words. Sam's eyes were piercing, filled with a mix of concern and disappointment. In that moment, Mr. Jenkins felt the weight of his decisions bearing down on him. "Dad, I'm not trying to attack you. I just want you to see the bigger picture," Sam continued, his voice softening. "What if you took the time to really understand these families? What if you met them? You might find that they're not so different from us." As Sam spoke, the image of the Thompson family floated in Mr. Jenkins's mind. He remembered their application, their hopeful smiles, and the dreams they had for their boys. Suddenly, he felt the walls he had built around himself begin to crumble. "I'll think about what you said," Mr. Jenkins finally replied, his voice unsteady. "But it's hard to change a mindset that's been ingrained for so long." "I know," Sam said, offering a sympathetic smile. "But it starts with being open to the possibility of change. You don't have to go through this alone." As the evening wore on, Mr. Jenkins found himself reflecting on his son's words. He began to wonder what it would mean to embrace that possibility. Could he really challenge the beliefs he had held for so long? And what if he had been wrong all along? Back at the Thompson household, the boys were winding down for the night, their laughter fading into the quiet of bedtime routines. Robert and Lisa exchanged glances filled with shared determination. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, but together, they felt capable of overcoming any obstacle. "We'll make this work," Robert assured Lisa as he tucked the boys into bed. "I have faith that this is the right path for us." Lisa nodded, her heart filled with hope. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be able to show Mr. Jenkins that we're not so different after all. As the lights dimmed in the Thompson household, a sense of peace settled over them. Little did they know, the journey ahead would not only transform their lives, but also challenge the very foundation of Mr. Jenkins's beliefs, bringing them together in ways they could never have imagined. Unforeseen connections. Days turned into weeks as the Thompson family immersed themselves in their new project. The excitement of building their own home fueled their determination, and each family member played a vital role in the process. Robert organized weekend trips to the property to clear debris and plan their dream house, while Lisa researched sustainable building practices, determined to create a space that was both beautiful and environmentally friendly. The boys, full of energy and ideas, transformed the land into a playground. They built makeshift forts from fallen branches and climbed the sturdy trees, their laughter echoing through the air. The property became their sanctuary, a place where they could explore their dreams and bond as a family. One Saturday morning, the family gathered around the kitchen table to finalize their plans for the house. Lisa had sketched out a rough design, incorporating their vision for a cozy living space and a garden where they could grow their own vegetables. "I was thinking we could have a big front porch," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Somewhere we can sit together in the evenings." "Yeah," Caleb chimed in. "And we can put a swing there." Robert nodded, envisioning the scene of his family relaxing on the porch after a long day of work. "A swing sounds great. And we could plant flowers all around to make it colorful." The boys cheered, excited about contributing to their future home. As they discussed colors and materials, Robert's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from Sam Jenkins, Mr. Jenkins' son. "Hey, I know this might be a long shot, but I heard you're building a new home. Mind if I come check it out?" Surprised, Robert quickly typed a response. "Sure, we'd love to have you over. Just let us know when you're free." Later that afternoon, while the boys played outside, Robert and Lisa cleaned up the property, preparing for Sam's visit. Although Robert was curious about Sam's motives, he also felt apprehensive. After all, the Jenkins family had turned them away. Was this just a gesture of pity? When Sam arrived, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the landscape. He stepped out of his car, a friendly smile on his face. "Hey guys, wow, this place is amazing." His enthusiasm was infectious as he walked toward the clearing where the Thompsons had set up a small picnic table. "Thanks. We're just getting started," Robert replied, feeling the tension ease. Sam was genuinely interested, and Robert appreciated that. "Come take a look at our plans." As they spread out the sketches and talked about the house's layout, the boys buzzed around Sam, showing him their forts and favorite climbing spots. "Can you help us build a treehouse?" Jacob asked, eyes bright with hope. Sam laughed, his expression softening. "I'd love to. I can show you some tricks I learned from my dad. He's great with tools." The conversation flowed easily, and Robert found himself relaxing. They discussed everything from building techniques to school experiences, bridging the gap between their two families. As Sam shared stories about growing up in the Jenkins household, Robert couldn't help but notice the contrast between their lives. While the Jenkins family lived in privilege, Sam's humility shone through, a quality Robert deeply respected. "Why did you reach out?" Robert finally asked, a note of curiosity in his voice. "You could have easily ignored us after your dad rejected our application." Sam paused, looking thoughtful. "Honestly, I've been struggling with how my dad runs his properties. It doesn't sit well with me. I wanted to see what you guys were doing and maybe learn from it. You're building something real, something meaningful." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the area in twilight, Robert felt a sense of kinship with Sam. They were both striving to create a better future, one for their families, and one for the community. "Maybe you can help us out more," Robert suggested, feeling inspired. "We could use all the hands we can get. I know a few things about construction, but I'm no expert." "Count me in," Sam replied, his eyes lighting up. "I'll bring my tools next weekend. It'll be fun." As they shook hands, a new chapter began, weaving their families together in unexpected ways. Over the next few weekends, Sam became a regular presence at the Thompson property. He taught the boys how to measure and cut wood, sharing tips that transformed their simple plans into something more substantial. They built not only a treehouse, but also a sturdy foundation for their future home, each board representing teamwork and perseverance. Meanwhile, Mr. Jenkins remained in his office, wrestling with his own feelings. The image of the Thompsons and their dreams weighed heavily on him. Every time he sorted through rental applications, he thought of the family he had turned away. He tried to reassure himself that it was business, that his decisions were based on maintaining standards. But every time he glanced at the rejection letter in his drawer, the guilt gnawed at him. One evening, as he worked late, Clara entered with a concerned look on her face. "Mr. Jenkins, I think you should see this." She handed him a newspaper, the headline bold and alarming. "Local families unite to challenge housing discrimination." Mr. Jenkins's heart sank as he scanned the article. It discussed various instances of discrimination within the housing market, highlighting families like the Thompsons who were being unjustly turned away. The piece concluded with a call for community members to come together and demand change. "Sir, this is getting a lot of attention," Clara said, her voice firm. "People are starting to speak out. You might want to reconsider your approach." Mr. Jenkins felt cornered. For years, he had lived in a bubble of privilege, blind to the implications of his choices. As he read the article again, he couldn't shake the feeling that the world was changing, and he was being left behind. Could he really continue to uphold a business model built on exclusion? The following day, he decided to take a drive through the neighborhood he had once been so proud of. He wanted to see the community he had built, the lives he had impacted with his choices. As he drove, he passed the Thompson property, where he saw Sam, Robert, and the boys hard at work. They were laughing and cheering each other on, their spirits unbroken despite the challenges they faced. The sight pierced Mr. Jenkins's heart. He pulled over and parked, watching from a distance as the boys celebrated their progress. Sam was showing them how to hammer nails properly, and Robert was giving them enthusiastic feedback. The joy on their faces contrasted sharply with the heavy weight on his own conscience. In that moment, Mr. Jenkins felt a shift within himself. This wasn't just about property values anymore. It was about people. He began to see the Thompsons not as a threat to his community, but as potential allies who could enrich it. As he drove back home, the weight of his decisions settled heavily on his shoulders. Perhaps it was time to confront his biases, to open himself up to the possibility of change. The question was, how? Back at the Thompson property, the family gathered around a small fire pit as the sun set, creating a warm glow that illuminated their faces. They shared stories, laughed about the day's challenges, and dreamed about their future home. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing moment, a testament to their resilience. Lisa looked around at her boys, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. "You know," she began, her voice reflective, "this is more than just a house. It's a place where we can be ourselves, where we can create memories." Robert nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "And we'll do it together. No matter what obstacles come our way, we'll face them as a family." As the stars twinkled above them, the Thompson family made a silent promise to one another, to build a home filled with love, hope, and understanding. Unbeknownst to them, their journey was about to intersect with Mr. Jenkins in ways they could never have anticipated, challenging both families to rethink their values and assumptions. The unexpected meeting. The weeks passed, and the Thompson family continued to make remarkable progress on their new home. With each passing day, the once empty lot transformed into a vibrant space, filled with laughter, creativity, and hard work. The treehouse stood proudly at one end of the property, a testament to their teamwork and determination. One sunny Saturday, while the boys played in the treehouse, Robert and Lisa sat on a blanket in the shade, discussing the next steps for their home. "I think we should start thinking about the garden," Lisa suggested, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Imagine having fresh vegetables right in our backyard." Robert smiled, picturing the rows of tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs flourishing under the sun. "Absolutely. We could even get the boys involved in planting and taking care of it. It'll be a great way for them to learn responsibility." Just as they were lost in their daydreams, Sam pulled up in his truck, tools rattling in the back. He hopped out, waving enthusiastically. "Hey guys, what's the plan for today?" "Garden planning," Lisa announced, her enthusiasm contagious. "Want to join us?" "I'd love to. I actually have a few ideas for easy-to-grow plants," Sam replied as he approached, eager to contribute. As they discussed their gardening dreams, laughter and camaraderie filled the air. Little did they know that across town, Mr. Jenkins was grappling with his own thoughts about the Thompsons. The article in the newspaper had sparked a fire of doubt within him, one that forced him to confront his deeply ingrained beliefs. One evening, as he sat in his office contemplating his next move, a thought struck him. He had been avoiding the reality of his actions for far too long. Perhaps it was time to meet the Thompsons face to face, not just as a landlord and tenants, but as fellow human beings. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed his car keys and headed out. The drive felt long, his heart racing with uncertainty. As he approached the Thompson property, he felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Would they be receptive? Would they even want to see him after what he had done? When he arrived, he parked at the edge of the property and sat for a moment, watching as the family worked together, their laughter echoing across the lot. Robert and Sam were busy measuring and discussing plans, while Lisa helped the boys with a small project nearby. The sight tugged at something deep within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Gathering his courage, Mr. Jenkins stepped out of the car and walked toward the group. The moment Robert caught sight of him, his smile faded, replaced by confusion. Sam turned to see who had approached, his expression quickly morphing into surprise. "Mr. Jenkins," Sam said, a hint of wariness in his voice. I wanted to talk," Mr. Jenkins stammered, suddenly aware of how awkward the situation felt. Robert straightened up, wiping his hands on his pants. "What brings you here?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. "I came to see your progress," Mr. Jenkins replied, gesturing vaguely at the property. "I wanted to understand what you were building here." The tension in the air was palpable. Lisa exchanged glances with Robert, uncertain of how to react. "We're building a home," Robert stated firmly, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Something our family can be proud of." Mr. Jenkins felt the weight of Robert's words, an unexpected sting of guilt washing over him. "I realize I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice shaky. "Rejecting your application. I should have given you a chance. I was wrong to judge you based on your race." Silence hung heavy between them as the gravity of his admission settled in. The boys, who had been oblivious to the conversation, suddenly sensed the tension and fell quiet, their curious eyes darting between the adults. "I know I can't change the past," Mr. Jenkins continued, his heart pounding. "But I want to understand you and your family better, if you are willing to let me." Robert regarded him for a moment, weighing his options. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice guarded. "Maybe you can teach me," Mr. Jenkins replied earnestly. "I've lived my life in a bubble, focused only on maintaining my properties, but I see now that there's so much more to people than what I've allowed myself to believe." Lisa stepped forward, her voice steady yet cautious. "If you really want to understand, it's going to take more than just showing up here. You'll need to listen to our experiences, our struggles." "I'm willing to do that," Mr. Jenkins promised, his eyes sincere. "I want to learn about what it means to be a part of this community and to create spaces that are truly welcoming." With that, an unexpected dialogue began. They moved to the picnic table, and for the first time, the lines between landlord and tenants blurred. Mr. Jenkins listened intently as Robert and Lisa shared their experiences, the challenges of finding housing, the injustices they had faced, and their hopes for a brighter future for their boys. Sam, too, chimed in, reflecting on his upbringing. "Dad, I don't want to make excuses for you, but you've always been so focused on your business. You never saw the human side of it. It's time to change that." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the property, Mr. Jenkins found himself captivated by the Thompsons' resilience. He began to understand the gravity of the impact he had on their lives, and it stirred something deep within him, a longing for connection, for understanding. "I never thought about it like that," Mr. Jenkins confessed. "I've always believed that maintaining standards meant keeping people like you out. But now, I realize that those standards have hurt so many." The conversation flowed freely, revealing layers of complexity and vulnerability. They talked about the importance of community, acceptance, and the shared dreams of their families. As the boys played nearby, unaware of the deep discussions unfolding, Mr. Jenkins felt a sense of hope beginning to blossom in his heart. After several hours of conversation, The sun set, leaving a warm twilight in its wake. Mr. Jenkins rose from the table, feeling a mix of gratitude and apprehension. "Thank you for letting me join you today," he said, his voice earnest. "I know this is just the beginning, but I want to do better. I want to be a part of this community in a meaningful way." "Actions speak louder than words," Robert reminded him gently. "If you truly want to make amends, it starts with listening and learning. We're open to it, but it's going to take time." Mr. Jenkins nodded, fully aware of the journey ahead. "I'll do my best," he promised, "and I'd like to help you with your home as well, if you'll let me." Lisa exchanged glances with Robert, and a silent understanding passed between them. "We'd appreciate that," she finally said, her voice warm. "But it's going to take some effort on all our parts." As they said their goodbyes, Mr. Jenkins walked back to his car, a new sense of purpose igniting within him. He knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but he felt ready to face them head-on. Back at the Thompson property, the family gathered around the fire pit once more, reflecting on the day's unexpected turn of events. The boys were buzzing with excitement, unaware of the deeper implications of what had just transpired. "Did you see how he seemed different?" Caleb asked, his innocent curiosity shining through. "I think he really wants to change," Lisa replied, feeling a flicker of hope. "But it's up to us to hold him accountable." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "We'll take it one step at a time. We've started to build our home, and maybe now we can help him build a bridge to our community." As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled overhead, the Thompson family felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were not just building a house, they were forging connections that could change lives. Little did they know, their collective journey would soon unfold in ways that would challenge their understanding of family, community, and what it truly meant to belong. Building bridges. The following week, the Thompson family gathered around their dining table, eager to outline their plans for the next phase of their home-building journey. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as Robert laid out a detailed schedule that incorporated both construction tasks and family activities. "Okay, team," he said, his enthusiasm infectious. "This weekend, we're going to tackle the foundation. With Sam's help, we should be able to make significant progress." "Can I help with the digging?" Ethan asked, his eyes shining with determination. "Absolutely. Everyone can pitch in," Lisa replied, smiling at her boys. "This is our family project, after all. We're in this together." Just then, Robert's phone buzzed with a new message. He checked it and found a text from Sam. "Hey, I'll be there Saturday morning with my tools and some friends who want to help. Looking forward to it." "Looks like we're getting reinforcements," Robert announced, his excitement growing. The boys cheered, their spirits high at the prospect of a busy weekend. As Saturday approached, the Thompson family buzzed with activity. The boys scoured their backyard for old tools and gear to prepare for the day's work. Lisa baked a batch of cookies to fuel everyone's energy, the sweet aroma filling their home and creating a sense of warmth and togetherness. On the day of the project, Sam arrived bright and early, accompanied by two of his friends, Maya and Daniel. They were college students studying architecture and engineering, eager to lend a hand. "We're ready to get our hands dirty," Maya declared, a wide grin on her face as she hopped out of the truck. "Welcome to the site," Robert said, shaking hands with the newcomers. "We're about to dig our foundation, and I could use all the help I can get." As they gathered around the lot, the group divided tasks. Robert and Sam led the effort to outline the foundation, using stakes and string to mark the corners. The boys jumped into action, their energy palpable as they grabbed shovels and began digging with enthusiasm. Lisa, supervising the chaos, made sure everyone had water and snacks, keeping spirits high. She smiled as she watched the boys working alongside Sam and his friends, their laughter mixing with the sounds of digging and the distant rustle of trees. "Can we take a break soon?" Jacob panted, wiping sweat from his forehead after a particularly vigorous dig. Absolutely, Lisa replied, handing out cold water bottles. Let's take a quick break and regroup. They sat in the shade, enjoying the cookies Lisa had baked. The mood was light, filled with banter and shared stories. Sam shared anecdotes from his college experiences, and the boys listened with wide eyes, soaking in the tales of campus life and late-night study sessions. "Do you think you'll ever go into business with your dad?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Sam hesitated, his expression shifting. "Honestly, I'm not sure. I love architecture, but I struggle with the way he runs his properties. It's tough when your values don't align." Robert leaned in, intrigued. "What do you mean by that?" "Well, my dad sees buildings as investments, profit margins, tenants, rules," Sam explained. "But I see them as spaces where people should feel welcome and safe. It's a constant battle." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "That's a tough position to be in, especially when family expectations come into play." Sam shrugged, a small smile creeping onto his lips. "I guess that's why I'm here. I want to learn from families like yours. You're building something meaningful, and it inspires me." As they finished their break, they returned to work, and the atmosphere became even more charged with determination. Everyone's effort began to visibly shape the future home, the outline of the foundation emerging from the ground. Hours passed in a blur of laughter and teamwork, and by the end of the day, they stood back to admire their handiwork. "We did it," Caleb exclaimed, arms raised triumphantly. The foundation was marked out clearly, a promising start to the Thompson family's dream home. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the property, they gathered for a group photo. "Say home," Robert called out, and they all grinned widely, the joy of the day reflected in their expressions. That evening, as they sat around the fire pit once more, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories, a sense of camaraderie enveloped them. The boys laughed and told ghost stories, while the adults discussed their dreams for the future. "This feels good," Robert said, looking around at his family and their new friends. "We're not just building a house, we're creating a community." "I agree," Sam added, his eyes shining. "I've learned so much from you all, and I want to keep helping. We can turn this into something bigger, a real collaboration." The group fell silent, contemplating the idea. "Maybe we could organize a community building day," Lisa suggested. "Invite others from the neighborhood to come and help. It could foster goodwill and create connections." "Great idea," Maya replied enthusiastically. "It's a perfect opportunity to engage more people and create a sense of belonging." As plans began to take shape, Mr. Jenkins sat alone in his office, reflecting on the day he had spent with the Thompsons. He replayed their conversations in his mind, his heart heavy with the realization of how isolated he had become from the community he was supposed to be serving. He recalled the laughter of the boys and the warmth of Lisa's hospitality. The connection he had forged with Sam filled him with hope, but also challenged him to confront his past decisions. It was a stark contrast to the way he had managed his properties, and he knew he needed to change. That night, unable to sleep, he grabbed a notepad and began jotting down ideas. "Community Day," he wrote, underlining it. He wanted to reach out to the Thompsons and offer his support for their vision. It was time to step out of his comfort zone and embrace the possibility of change. The next morning, Mr. Jenkins sent a message to Sam, proposing a meeting to discuss the community building day. He felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, knowing that he was taking the first step toward breaking down the barriers he had built around himself. When Sam received the message, he felt a rush of hope. He quickly replied, arranging a time to meet with Mr. Jenkins later that day. As they sat across from each other in Mr. Jenkins' office, the atmosphere was tense yet charged with possibility. "I wanted to discuss how I can help with the community day," Mr. Jenkins began, his tone earnest. "I believe this could be an opportunity for me to learn and grow." Sam nodded, his heart pounding. "I think it's a great idea. This could change a lot of perspectives, including yours. I've been reflecting on my actions, Mr. Jenkins continued, choosing his words carefully. I want to support families like the Thompsons and be more inclusive in my properties. It's time for me to build bridges instead of walls. Sam smiled, feeling a sense of relief. I think you're on the right path. The Thompsons would appreciate your involvement. They believe in community, and so do I. As they discussed plans for the community building day, Mr. Jenkins felt a new sense of purpose. He envisioned a day filled with activities that would bring people together. Barbecues, games for the kids, workshops on home improvement, and a space for families to share their stories. Meanwhile, the Thompsons continued to prepare for the event, filled with anticipation. They created flyers to distribute around the neighborhood, inviting everyone to join in the festivities. As the days passed, excitement began to build. On the day of the event, the Thompson property was alive with energy. Colorful banners waved in the breeze, and the scent of grilled food wafted through the air. Families gathered, children played games, and laughter echoed through the trees. Mr. Jenkins arrived early, nervous yet determined to make a positive impression. He saw Robert and Lisa setting up tables and joined them, offering to help. Thank you for letting me be a part of this, he said, his sincerity evident. Of course, Robert replied, glancing at Lisa with a smile. This is about building a community together. As the event unfolded, people began to mingle and connections formed. Mr. Jenkins watched in awe as families shared their stories, united by their experiences. He realized that this was what he had been missing: human connection. By the end of the day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mr. Jenkins stood before the crowd, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude. I want to thank everyone for coming out today, he began, his voice steady. Today marks a new beginning, not just for the Thompsons, but for all of us. I've learned that community is built on understanding, acceptance, and support. Applause erupted, and he saw the Thompsons smiling proudly among the crowd. In that moment, he felt a shift within himself, a sense of belonging he had never anticipated. As the evening drew to a close, the Thompsons reflected on the day's success. They had not only built their home, but also helped to foster connections within the community. We did it, Lisa said, her eyes glistening with joy. We brought people together. Robert nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment. And it's just the beginning. We have a long way to go, but we're on the right path. With their hearts full, the Thompson family embraced the promise of the future, one that held the potential for growth, understanding, and lasting connections that would resonate through their lives and their community for years to come. Little did they know that their journey would continue to intertwine with Mr. Jenkins's, shaping not just their lives, but the very fabric of the town itself. Foundations of change. As the weeks rolled into months, the Thompson family and Mr. Jenkins found themselves intertwined in ways they had never anticipated. The community building day had sparked a series of positive changes, not only in the Thompson household, but throughout the neighborhood. The connections formed during that event became a foundation for understanding, collaboration, and a shared vision for a more inclusive community. The Thompsons continued to work diligently on their home, and as autumn settled over the town, the leaves transformed into a brilliant tapestry of colors. Every Saturday they welcomed a growing number of neighbors, families they had met during the community event, who came to lend a hand with construction. The sense of camaraderie grew with each passing day. One crisp Saturday morning, the Thompson family gathered around the kitchen table to plan their next steps. The air was filled with the comforting scent of cinnamon and freshly baked muffins, a delightful treat for the day's work. "All right, team," Robert said, addressing his family and their friends who had come over to help. "Today we're going to focus on framing the walls. If we can get that done, we'll be one step closer to having a roof over our heads." The boys cheered, their excitement palpable as they helped organize tools and materials. Lisa distributed muffins and hot cocoa, making sure everyone felt energized and appreciated. As they began the day's work, Sam arrived with a few more friends from college, all eager to contribute. Maya, Daniel, and a couple of their classmates brought extra tools and a wealth of knowledge. "We're ready to roll," Maya declared, a wide grin spreading across her face. "Let's make some walls." With everyone working in tandem, the atmosphere buzzed with energy and laughter. Robert and Sam worked together on the framing, their skills complementing each other perfectly. The boys, under Lisa's watchful eye, tackled smaller tasks, like organizing nails and measuring boards, learning the ins and outs of construction as they went. "Look at us," Caleb exclaimed, holding up a measuring tape like a trophy. "We're building a real house." As the day unfolded, conversations flowed freely. Sam shared stories about his studies, while the Thompsons talked about their dreams for the garden and the kind of family life they hoped to cultivate in their new home. The discussions grew deeper, touching on themes of acceptance, community, and what it meant to belong. After hours of hard work, the first wall finally stood tall, a visible representation of their collective efforts. As the group admired their handiwork, a sense of pride filled the air. They had come together, strangers at first, but now united by a common purpose. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they gathered around a makeshift fire pit. The warmth of the flames flickered against the cool night air, and laughter filled the space. They shared stories, roasted marshmallows, and planned future gatherings, each moment reinforcing the bonds they had forged. As the fire crackled, Mr. Jenkins sat among them, feeling the mixture of gratitude and humility. He had come to see the Thompsons not just as tenants but as friends, partners in building something much larger than any single property. They had opened his eyes to the strength that comes from community, a lesson he had long overlooked. "Thank you all for welcoming me into your lives," Mr. Jenkins said, his voice sincere. "I realize now how important it is to listen, to understand, and to embrace diversity. I want to do better, not just for myself, but for everyone in this community." The group nodded, their expressions warm and encouraging. "We're all learning together," Lisa replied. "And that's what makes this journey worthwhile." As winter approached, the construction continued, with each new phase deepening their connections. With the walls in place, they moved on to roofing, insulation, and eventually the interior design. Neighbors continued to volunteer their time, contributing skills and labor, transforming the Thompson home into a true community effort. Meanwhile, Mr. Jenkins began to implement changes in his own business practices. He started hosting regular community meetings, encouraging open dialogue about housing issues and tenant rights. Slowly but surely, he was dismantling the walls he had built, both literally and figuratively. His properties began to reflect the values he had adopted through his friendship with the Thompsons. One evening, after a particularly productive day at the Thompson site, Mr. Jenkins invited Robert and Lisa to his office. "I've been thinking about how to best support families like yours," he began, pouring them each a cup of coffee. "I want to change the way I run my business." Lisa looked intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I've decided to create a scholarship program for families in our community," he explained. "It will provide financial assistance for those looking to rent homes or buy properties. I want to make it easier for people to find safe, welcoming spaces." Robert exchanged a surprised glance with Lisa. "That's an incredible idea, Mr. Jenkins. It could change lives." "I hope so," Mr. Jenkins replied, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "I've realized that it's not just about bricks and mortar. It's about building a community where everyone has a chance to thrive." As winter descended, the first snowfall blanketed the town, transforming the landscape into a winter wonderland. The Thompson family was able to celebrate a significant milestone, the completion of their home. They held a small gathering with their neighbors, who had become an extended family over the months. "Today is not just about moving into a house," Robert declared, standing in the cozy living room, decorated with handmade crafts from the boys and warm lights strung across the windows. "It's a celebration of community, of friendship, and of new beginnings." The room filled with applause and cheers, and Caleb tugged at Robert's sleeve. "Can we have a party now?" he asked, his excitement infectious. "Of course," Lissa laughed, wrapping her arms around her family. "Let's celebrate together." That evening, as they shared food, laughter, and stories, the atmosphere was filled with warmth and joy. Neighbors who had once been strangers shared their hopes and dreams, their struggles and triumphs, uniting in the spirit of community. As the night wore on, Mr. Jenkins stood in the corner, watching the scene unfold. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment, realizing that this was the kind of community he had always wanted to foster. No longer an outsider, he had become an integral part of the fabric that connected them all. The following morning, he sat at his desk, reflecting on the journey he had taken with the Thompsons. He drafted a letter to the local newspaper, sharing the story of their community-building efforts and his commitment to creating a more inclusive environment in his properties. With each word, he felt a sense of liberation. It was time to open the doors to dialogue and understanding, to challenge the status quo and build a community that thrived on connection rather than exclusion. As the months progressed, the bonds between the Thompsons and Mr. Jenkins deepened, evolving into a partnership that began to impact the town on a broader scale. Together, they organized events that brought people together, fostering understanding among families from diverse backgrounds. One evening, they hosted a cultural exchange night, inviting families to share their heritage through food, music, and stories. The turnout was overwhelming, with neighbors eager to learn more about one another. The room was filled with the tantalizing aromas of dishes from various cultures, spicy curries, savory casseroles, and sweet pastries. As children ran around, laughing and playing, the adults mingled, sharing stories of their backgrounds. Mr. Jenkins watched as the Thompsons helped facilitate conversations, bridging gaps that had once felt insurmountable. "Thank you for making this happen," Mr. Jenkins said to Robert and Lisa during a quiet moment. "You've shown me the power of community, and I'm grateful to be a part of this journey." Robert smiled, a sense of pride swelling within him. "We're all in this together, and it's amazing to see how far we've come." As the evening drew to a close, a sense of hope and unity hung in the air. The seeds of understanding had been planted, and the future looked bright. Little did they know, their journey was just beginning, and the lessons learned would continue to shape their lives and the community for years to come. With every gathering, every project, and every shared experience, they were not just building homes, they were building bridges, ones that connected hearts, minds, and dreams, creating a community rooted in acceptance and love.